And now we move into agenda additions. We have one for under other, number 5, the lead agency agreement. Are there any others? All right, then I need a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Mr. Gieske. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The agenda is passed. We're now into our first public comment period. There's a 4-minute time limit, and a card must be filled out and handed to the superintendent. And when you come to the podium, please introduce yourself. Do we have any cards?
We have no cards.
All right. Then we're on to the consent agenda. Any questions regarding the minutes for September 9th, September 20th, September 23rd, and October 3rd? Any comments regarding the payment of bills of $300,411.17? Is there a motion for the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call?
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. On to subcommittee reports and project updates. First is form-based code.
All right, so we had a work session on Tuesday, October 8th at 3 o'clock at the Warrior Pavilion, and we had a very good turnout between the Planning Commission, the Zoning Board of Appeals, and the public. So we were able to discuss several different facets that John took away from the Downtown Summit, incorporated, and he came back with questions as far as the B1 district and form-based code. And John will be coming back at the end of the month to be able to provide an update on the second item, which is the MAPS training, and the master plan update for Tuesday, October 29th at 1:30 at the Warrior Pavilion. The 29th will be a very eventful day. I'm seeking a work session later on the agenda associated with the 29th from noon to 1:20. So the afternoon of October 29th at the Warrior Pavilion, there's going to be training and updates provided on the RRC certification. As far as the MEDC is partnering with the Build Experience to support entrepreneurs statewide. I was able to attend a training in Detroit, in Corktown, and they have a successful entrepreneurial, it's an 8-week program that they have been able to fill quite a few storefronts. The MEDC has recognized the success of that and wants to expand that program beyond Southeast Michigan. So when I have more information on that Build Experience and how the MEDC is willing to financially support fostering that program, I will come back to the board. And I was very impressed with what they've been able to do in Corktown with the entrepreneurial spirit. We could use, hopefully, some of the building blocks from there to expand that in Oscoda. And then I'm going to turn it over to Trustee Cummings for the phone system update.
Oh, okay, sure. So just a couple points. So the splicing activity that needs to occur where we actually bring a run of fiber from River Road over to Township Hall is scheduled for October 24th. This is the major point because it allows us to actually connect into that backbone that's over there. And then the second point is an additional failover circuit is being installed on from the opposite side of Township Hall, the street of which I never remember the name of. It's not River Road, it's the other side. It's Dwight, I always forget the name of it. Thank you. So from Dwight Street, AT&T is going to be bringing one. It's all part of the same contract, all part of the same service. It is a failover line that ATI will be providing us, which is important. It's nice to have a failover, as we've seen that sometimes fiber optic cable can get cut, and this is a failover. So then the third point is that we have contractor support to complete the phone system and the cabling project by the end of the year. So in fact, we want to get it done by the middle to end of November. So this is actually a really big point since we've been working on this for quite a while. That's it. Any questions?
Policy Subcommittee?
Only that we met, the policy subcommittee met again. Some of the product from that meeting is on the agenda tonight, so that's kind of an update in and of itself. But I just wanted the board to know that the policy subcommittee had met again and is continuing to work and is actually creating some outputs, so.
Good.
Anybody else have any updates? All right, then on to the Economic Improvement Committee recommendation for an Economic Improvement Director position.
Okay, so the Economic Improvement Committee, or the EIC, ranked the Economic Improvement Director, or the EID, applicants to determine the candidates to interview. The EIC conducted interviews of 4 EID candidates on Saturday, the 5th of October. The EIC also formulated a recommendation for the EID position to the Township Board during its regular meeting on the 8th of October. Based on that discussion, the EIC is recommending the Township Board that Mr. Todd Dickerson be offered a 3-year contract at $115,000 for the first year, $120,000 for the second year, and $125,000 for the third year, to be paid out of the Property O&M Fund 236, 266801-000 for professional fees. Your packet contains the job posting for the EID position, the EID cost categories associated with the proposal to have this as a contracted position. Mr. Dickerson's cover letter and resume are also included in the packet. Mr. Mark Weingant, the chair of the Economic Improvement Committee, is also in attendance here tonight to address the board regarding the recommendation from the Economic Improvement Committee. If you can come up to the podium.
Hey. I thought I was going to have to say everything that Dave just said, so thanks, Dave.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Fire away.
Questions, comments?
When we had our work session on Friday, I asked Mr. Schaefer if he could provide some information about salary history. To what degree we can describe that in public, I'm not sure, but I wanted to know if the information had been provided to him or to you, because I think that this position, being now our most expensive position in the township, people are going to want to understand why we're paying what we're paying. Now, couching that question with a statement that we've already discussed in the past, that when people are contractors, they're paid more because they're paying their taxes and their overheads that otherwise companies or a township would pick up for that individual. That could be in health insurance as well. It could be retirement as well. So it's customary that people get paid more. But I'm curious to understand if this salary that we're planning to offer him through 1099 is actually going to be something in line with whether it makes sense to you and the board.
Yep.
Or the committee, I mean, sorry.
Yeah, it's a lot. But I think at the heart of your question is, do we know what his salary was? Are we overpaying for him? Is that
right. That's basically right.
the gist of it? Okay.
That's right.
So, as far as exactly what he was making, don't have that information. You're limited on what you can ask on things like that. He comes from a different state as well, so you're limited on that. However, through research of the type of positions that he had held, the different consulting positions that he had, and the different business development, vice president roles that he had, and the size of companies that he had, would lead us to believe that in most cases, this is right in line or possibly even less for what he would have been making prior to. But I'd also like to change the focus a little bit to not just focus on necessarily what he was making versus what's necessary to get the candidate that we need for the position that we're trying to fill, right? So I don't know if that answered it 100%, but
No, that's fair.
if you have a follow-up question, by all means.
No, it's fine. That's all good. No, that's what I was looking for. Next.
Was this 3-year staggered amounts? Was that what was offered by the committee, or is that his idea?
Nope. The way that we came up with the salary, 100% our idea. He didn't work with us on that at all. This was through our work session, I believe, last Tuesday is when it happened. And so the idea on that is a couple of different things. First off, we wanted some room without having to go back to the board. We were handed a window. And without having to go back to the board next year, say he's doing really well, something else like that, and we think he's more deserving, so to speak, without having to come back to the board again. So just get it approved one time. In addition to that, it's non-commission based in a business development type role, consulting role. It's not project based. He's not getting extra, incentives or pay based on delivering a major manufacturer here or anything in between, right? So, a traditional cost of living increase might be 3%-ish, so to speak, give or take, on either side. This 5,000 essentially increment represents somewhere right in that ballpark of what you would see as a typical cost of living increase. So that's where we came up with that idea at. Good question.
In the interview process, did you get a feel for how soon he'd be able to come here and get started with us here?
Yeah, we did. And so, while we don't have a definitive start date, Dave has had follow-up conversations with him as well. But from the committee standpoint, we had talked to him about the urgency of it. He understands that it was yesterday, right? Mm-hmm. We talked to him about his commitments where he's at right now in Ohio and being able to leave, and make the jump and commitment to getting up here sooner rather than later. He said all the right things during, the interview on that, and spoke to the point that he could be here as soon as possible. I think we have an idea that most likely, even if he's not in town working, he could be contributing by November 1st, I believe is our target. Fully relocated is still yet to be determined, but he understands the urgency of the position, for sure.
Yeah, this position is a little different. You don't necessarily have to be sitting in an office here in the Township Hall to be doing your job.
Correct.
I think was the idea for this from the beginning, so.
Correct. Yep. So he could start, the beginning process of this position is going to be a lot of digging into everything. Obviously, he can start that immediately from wherever, right? But he does understand the urgency. The point was clear that it requires living here, relocating to here. We didn't dictate, Oscoda or Osable or something like that, but the area, and the urgency was clear to him. So.
Very
Yep.
good.
Yep.
Did your group come up with an idea of where he is going to be sited?
Physically located.
Yeah.
So we discussed that. I think as a group, we're not looking to put a hard requirement on office hours or anything else like that. As far as location purposes, I think multiple people here on the board have said that they have certain hours where there's availability, and I believe Dave can correct me if I'm wrong. There's some other office space around the township that he could use. But again, the idea wouldn't necessarily be 40 hours in an office, feet held to that. It would be retention calls, things like that, with all of our local business owners, traveling to attract new businesses, doing a lot of training, a lot of MEDC events, things like that. So office space, for that typical 40-hour-a-week person or more, not as necessary. So to be determined, hopefully. Best way I can answer that question.
I have one more. So It's now public knowledge that the candidate has multiple contracts, that he's a realtor and he has other sources of income as well as just this one that we're talking about offering him. So my question is, do you feel that you're working with the township attorney to put a language into this agreement, this contract with him, secures some security for the township, that we aren't going to be stuck in a situation that we can't get out of if we're not seeing proper performance?
Yes. So I can answer that question as just yes, simply, but I'll elaborate a little bit on that. A couple different parts. So while right now he is a consultant through, real estate and other things that you've mentioned, to be determined on whether he can, he continues any of those engagements, quite frankly. Those are all locally located down in Ohio. But in addition to that, while we're working through this contract with the attorney, it's similar to previous ones that the townships used, mostly an at-will employment. So we're looking to beef up the language a little bit. The final information I sent to the attorney today is looking to beef up the language on some sort of commitment. It's hard to define, mostly because, we want that freedom to be able to, as things pop up, as things, I guess, change over time, we want him to be able to deliver on those as well. But at the end of the day, his contract is up to the board, obviously, on satisfactory performance. So we'll make sure that language is in there, and I believe the board gets to approve that, correct, before it's offered to him anyway. So, but that additional language is being put in there.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So I have a similar question about the contract, and I appreciate your explanation and the glimpse into the inside of what the committee's been thinking and how they've been operating. I've shared this previously, but not with you yourself in person, about my hesitation for this position and the costs associated with obtaining someone. Like you said, there's certain things you are required if you're going to fill a position such as this one.
Yep.
So my main question is the committee been considering, and you spoke to it a bit to Mr. Cummings, benchmarks or attainable goals in the contract for this individual? A lot's riding to me on my mind on this contract and what it stipulates, what it requires of the individual, what value it brings to the community for the amount that we're going to have to pay for it. And it's hard to quantify that. Are we getting our money worth? I personally am interested in seeing actual dollars. What kind of dollars can this individual claim to have brought into the community, whether direct, indirect? I'd be interested in too. Fitting that into a contract is a
difficult. So
Yes.
I'll try to comment the best way I know how to your question. So it's a good question. The challenge when you start putting direct language tied to, let's say, dollar amounts in a contract. Let's say he starts bringing in, and I'm just throwing out customer XYZ, and they're a $500 million company, okay? And he starts working on that economic development piece, and that process, that sales cycle could be 2 years, could be 4 years, could be 5 years, okay? And so delivering on that dollar amount is almost impossible, and then what do you do when he doesn't hit that dollar amount in the first 6 months, or depending on how granular you get with that contract? Do you hold his feet to the fire and let him go immediately and then start all back over? And then not only that, the realistic goal part of it.
Sure.
Some of it's not under his control, right? His or hers. Some of it could be with rezoning things, right? The township board working closely with them. Some of it could be the economy, right? A lot of things could change throughout that contract. So not that we want to be overly vague, but you also can't be too overly specific. And then just at the very beginning, I can hear, nervous about the position and a lot riding on it and all that stuff. And what I'll comment to that is one of the things that we certainly learned, even if we didn't already know it going into the interview process and everything, is you look at even surrounding communities such as West Branch, Alpena, around Northeast Michigan. And then in addition to that, we had candidates from Ann Arbor. and then parts of Ohio, Texas, a lot of different places. Some similar sized towns and cities, and some much, much bigger. But the one thing that you find for sure is they most all have this position, and they most all like value this position. They compensate them accordingly, and it's a high level position within their community to continue to foster what's already there and then grow it. So I think if we're looking to take the next step, it makes sense. If we can afford it and budget it, and that's the goal of the township, is to drive that growth, makes sense. And then the old adage of you get what you pay for is mostly true in the professional world. And we're looking for a true professional with business development experience, local government experience, bringing kind of a deal maker, bringing either government business to business type stuff and putting it together. And that's not usually very cheap to find. So best way I can answer that
I
for you.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
I guess I have one more as I was listening to Mr. Nordine. So obviously this guy ultimately reports to the board, but obviously it's going to be through your committee. Your committee's not disbanding, just
Correct.
with hiring him. So is there an individual on the committee who is taking responsibility for making sure that this candidate is going to be performing? And what that workload is going to be, lining up the activities and making sure he's getting them done?
Yes. So it's two-pronged approach, I believe here. The way that we envision it today, as it sits, is we have the committee, and we also have Mr. Schaefer. So he is certain that there is plenty on his desk right now that he can drop off on him day one, right? But no, so Dave leads the charge, as everybody already knows, on a lot of the stuff, a lot of the economic development stuff, the MEDC stuff. So, he'll be working closely with Dave, obviously. Dave's even offered up, he's one of the ones that offered up his office for part of the day or the whole day, plenty of space in there to work together. So they'll be working closely together. And then through our committee, I chair the committee. Obviously, my intention would be, to be highly involved. We're making the decision to put this position out there and to recommend it to the board. And if it gets approved, obviously we have a responsibility to, implement it, monitor it, and make sure that it's staying course and going the same direction that the board's looking for. So I think between our committee, obviously, and then and Dave, so he'll be getting direction from both. Dave will be overseeing a lot of it in the sense of day-to-day stuff. They'll be working more often than we only meet every couple of weeks, but the committee will be setting the goals and the targets and then making sure he delivers. That answer it mostly?
It does.
Okay.
I only want to make a public caution here.
Yep.
When there's more than one person who's responsible, you get the delinquent child. I want to know, as the board has heard me say before, I'm famous for this statement, I want one throat to choke.
Yeah.
I want to know who to go to when there's a question, and I want to know where that person is, I want to know what's going on. I want to know that we can get a report back on the individual and his progress. So I'm just asking for who that is, and I want to make sure that your committee is amply involved and that it isn't falling on Mr. Schaefer because he's the superintendent.
Yes, understood. So I'm slightly new to
it's okay.
township organization here. So I believe the answer that you're looking for would be our committee, and if you're looking for the one throat to choke, which I like that statement, by the way, we use it a lot. We use it a lot at work. That's how we structure our business too. So. I can bring this back to the committee. We can discuss. I would assume that the finger will probably be pointed at me. So.
Frankly, I was hoping it would be because I trust you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So, but of course, we'll take it back to the committee and we'll talk about, who can be the one point of contact for the board or Mr. Schaefer to talk to about, this fella's performance.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a couple more. Do you envision that this gentleman is going to want some clerical help?
So this gentleman asked a lot of good questions at the end of the interview. He stuck around and asked a lot. One of those questions was exactly that, about additional administrative help. We didn't make any commitments on that or anything. I think we, let him know the help that already exists in, in the board offices and Dave's office and whatnot. And so depending on where this goes, I foresee it being absolutely possible. However, just in the initial contract, looking at that, those additional expenses for administrative help or whatnot would be his responsibility as a contractor, a consultant for the
That's
for the
what I
board.
thought.
Correct. Yeah. Yep. Exactly. But I don't think that doesn't mean that if we have help, that we wouldn't be able. We wouldn't be able. Yeah, that's available. But the expectation isn't that he would be eating up resources from the township outside of, the scope of his work. That would be his responsibility as part of being a consultant.
Well, I would think that if he's gonna really get into this job and be real busy,
Yep.
the answer to my question is yes, he's gonna need
Yep.
some clerical help.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would agree with you on that. And if he does hire clerical help that helps with the township, it's in there that the board also has to approve the hires. At least that's the way the contract's reading right now.
My next question, and it'll be the final one. When we hired Mr. Schaefer, it was kind of a slam dunk. I think he knows that, but if he doesn't, I think it was unanimous. I mean, he blew us away. Was it something like that as far as your committee, that this guy was head and shoulders above all the other applicants?
Yep. So I believe in 100% honesty on this. I will say, and I think I'm allowed to say this, but so when we deliberated at the end, and we decided what candidate we were going to pick, he had not unanimous decision, but only because we had some other really great candidates that some of the other committee members were strongly considering. And so I would say that he was top 2 candidate from the very beginning. He interviewed extremely well, answered, with all the right stuff, and then asked great follow-up questions, was a little bit more enthusiastic about the opportunity than most of the other candidates, I would say. Has some experience and roots here in Northeast Michigan as well, cabin in Lewiston, I believe. Some additional things that kind of set him apart from some of the other candidates. So slam dunk is, I'm not sure what you're looking for on that. I will say that he was a slam dunk for a handful of the committee members.
Okay.
And then there were a few committee members that there were, like I said, strong other candidates that,
Yeah.
were probably a little bit more of a slam dunk for them. But at the end of the day, everybody was on the same page as far as we can't go wrong with this candidate either.
Okay. Well, that helps.
Okay.
Any other comments? All right, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the recommendation of the Economic Improvement Committee to move forward with Mr. Todd Dickerson to serve as the contracted EID for the term of 3 years and authorize the superintendent and township attorney to negotiate the EID contract.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Gieske.
Oh, I have a comment.
Go ahead.
Only to explain that, as I expressed, I'm still not there totally. The contract's going to be the thing that determines this for me. So I feel out of sorts on how to vote for this. I'm going to vote no, but it's not because I'm vehemently opposed to it. It's that the contract's going to be the determining factor. So I just wanted to clarify that, clarify myself there.
Okay, anything else?
Well, then I just need to clarify, then what's the purpose of this motion?
It's not my motion.
No, I'm just saying, asking the board, I'm not looking at you specifically.
Okay.
So, I mean, we're here to move forward with this candidate. The contract isn't fully in place yet. He needs to know, so I mean, what does that mean? What are we offering this committee, and what are we offering the candidate with this motion? What happens next?
They will negotiate a contract with the attorney and Mr. Schaefer.
Okay, so we're still in sort of
And the
a
contract would have
halfway
to-
motion kind of a thing. We're mid-process. So then I look at this from the viewpoint of we're putting our confidence in the recommendation and we're moving it forward. That's my interpretation of this, if I had to characterize it. Okay, so now I know what a yes and no would mean. Good, thank you.
Anything else? Roll call.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, no. Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
All right, capital improvement plan from the Planning Commission.
All right, your packet contains a memo dated the 8th of October from the zoning administrator concerning the planning commission's approval of the township's 5-year capital improvement plan, the CIP. The years on the CIP are from 2020 through 2024, so 5 years. The planning commission's approval of the CIP is in line with the MEDC's Redevelopment Ready Communities Best Practice Criteria, as well as the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act 110 of 2006. The CIP is a culmination of meeting with the CIP policy group, input from the township department heads, input from the planning commission, and 4 township board work sessions associated with the 2020 budget. If approved, the township board will be seeing the 2020 amounts plugged into the specific line items detailed for each of the funds in the 2020 budget. The township board is the final step of the CIP approval process. We started this in February, and the CIP policy met. I know getting the process down is a little bit different than what you've seen previously, and I don't know how it really was previously done, because by the time I got here in May, the CIP for 2019 through 2023 was already completed. This year has been aligning this process with the best practice criteria. So it's been a big lift. I appreciate all the efforts from the CIP policy group and all the different boards, and it feels really good to be able to put this in front of the township board.
Comments?
Well, I would just comment that this was new for the planning commission. This had not been done in past years, to have it reviewed by the planning commission, which it's supposed to be. So this was kind of new for all the members, and they had, as I think Mr. Schaefer would agree, they had a lot of questions about what was involved with this, but I think all those questions got answered. We went through the entire plan pretty thoroughly, line by line, and I'm happy to announce that we move to recommend it to the board.
Any other comments?
Yes, I brought this up at meetings in the past, work sessions, the capital improvement policy group, to Dave recently in an email, that I'd like to see us put a plan for parks spending in the capital improvement plan. We've made some plans recently for some of the parks. There's a recreation master plan. There's different plans that the township has for parks, but we don't have funding planned year to year to implement that. Pretty much the strategy has been to rely on grants, which is good. If we can turn a small amount of money into a large amount of money with a local match, that's great with me. But in the years that we aren't successful in obtaining grants, I'd like to still be making headway on the parks. So it's something I'd like to include in capital improvement plans going forward. Like I said, I've talked to Mr. Schaefer about this. Trying to implement it is going to need some more detail as to exactly what projects the board would like to accomplish and dollar amounts associated with that. But since it's come up again, the capital improvement plan, I want to continue mentioning it, that I'd like to see us plan for improvements in the park system instead of just waiting for them to kind of come to us.
Do you have details on what improvements?
Like I said, I've been working with Mr. Schaefer on it. Nothing's materialized from the first time that I've mentioned to now. So not in time for this capital improvement plan. I have a more clear understanding of what Mr. Schaefer thinks needs to be specified for the capital improvement plan, but I personally do not have detailed plan or dollar figures to put into that at this time.
All right, any other comments? Is there a motion? I make a motion to approve the 20 to 2024 CIP as presented.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weeds, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Policy standards.
All right, so the next two action items are really kind of the result of the policy subcommittee. So your packet contains an October 9th email from Clerk Nordine, as well as the draft of the policy standards policy created by the policy subcommittee. The policy standards policy is the result of the first two policy subcommittee meetings thus far, and this requires township board approval.
Comments?
Well, I would just like to state that, well, as part of the policy committee, myself, like to take credit for this policy, standard policy, but it's actually Mr. Nordine that put the original draft together, and was very good. I thought we reviewed it at the committee level and had a few changes to make, and he subsequently updated it with those suggestions. So I think a lot of the credit goes to Mr. Nordine on this, this particular policy, standard policy agreement here. Just so everybody's aware that it wasn't just the policy committee that did this. Mr. Nordine did the bulk of the work on this one.
I appreciate that, and as primary creator, and I looked at it in this packet with a different perspective, and there's some commas that we require in the policy requirements that aren't lacking in this policy. So upon approval, I would like the board to
You have some work to do yet.
be aware that I would like to make some minor grammatical changes.
I move we approve the policy standard policy.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call?
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Rewrite of the personnel policy.
All right, so another product of the policy subcommittee is the concept of updating the township's personnel policy manual / employee handbook. Your packet contains 3 emails detailing the 8 law firms that were solicited to provide quotes to rewrite the township's personnel policy manual employee handbook. The township only received pricing back from Miller Canfield with a cap of up to $3,500 to perform this project, to be paid out of the general fund 101-299 801.000 professional fees. Once approved, Miller Canfield estimates a time frame of 2 weeks to complete this project, and this requires township board approval.
Comments?
Who's gonna be working with them on this?
Myself and the attorney.
You and okay.
If Mr. Nordine was so key, would he not be a participant in this?
Yeah, this is not gonna be 2 weeks and then just done. I envision this kind of review. We went through this with the utility ordinance. I don't think it needs as much work as the utility ordinance, but this will be most likely a work session where we're gonna have to go through and highlight all the different changes. This isn't an update. This is gonna be rewriting it.
And I would note this is an initiative partly of the policy subcommittee too, so there's work to be done there potentially. And I won't let it slip by without pestering Dave and attempting to insert myself in the process, given,
You
The
did
duties
not
of-
insert yourself in the process. I did.
no, but I will probably attempt to, because the responsibilities under my office with human resources and payroll, a lot of work needs to be done, and a lot of the improvements will go a long way into helping us day to day, so I'm very interested in its progress.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
Yeah, I move that we approve the proposal from Miller Canfield to rewrite the township's personnel policy and manual, employee handbook to the amount not to exceed $3,500. I'd like to say if they don't charge us $3,500, Mr. Nordine gets the remainder. But I better not say that.
I'll support that.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Mr. Gieske. Roll call?
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Gieske.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Increased appropriations for the row invoice.
All right, so Rose, final deliverables for the Iosco Exploration Trail Phase 3, the bike path, design engineering, were sent out to the board last month. It was the 19th of September. Your packet contains an invoice from Rowe concerning the IET totaling $26,114.24 to be paid out of the general fund 101-751-880.572 for Parks and Recreation. The invoice is associated with the Township Board's approval of Rowe's $130,950 for the entire project of the final design engineering of Phase 3, and that was back in April. This was a TAP grant funded initiative not originally incorporated in the 2019 general fund appropriations. At the last Township Board meeting, it was mentioned that the invoice for Rowe was still in the process of being finalized, and Rowe was waiting to be invoiced from the Commonwealth Heritage Group associated with the archaeological services for the design engineering. In order to pay Rowe's invoice totaling $26,114.24, requesting the Township Board consider increasing 2019 General Fund 101-751 Parks and Rec appropriations by the $26,114.24. So that would take the total for 101-751 for Parks and Rec from $314,655 up to $340,770 for 2019. This request would increase 2019 total general fund appropriations from $3,357,320 up to $3,383,435. Please note that if approved, this invoice would bring the total project up to $129,659.12, which is under the total project amount of $130,950, and this invoice requires Township Board approval.
Comments?
This is finalized, it's done,
Done.
and we submit for a grant refund?
We got that later.
Okay.
Well, we're going to talk about the TAP grant later. This we got extended with the DNR to submit through April of 2020 for reimbursement.
I brought this up Friday, Dave, but just as a reminder to indicate to Rowe that they need to get the correct road name on their invoice so that they have it as
Yes.
Ridge Road instead of River Road. So
Yes.
that any funding applications they might put in, they have the right road name on there.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to move to increase the 2019 general fund Parks and Recreation appropriations by $26,115.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. John Henry, partial payment number 2.
All right, so your packet contains a string of emails from Rick Freeman with Rowe dated the 9th of October, providing a detailed update on the progress made for Phase 1 of the water main extension. The spreadsheet mentioned Mr. Freeman's email, so there was a reference in there to the specific amounts, as well as the detailed partial payment number 2 submitted by John Henry. Partial payment number 2 is in the amount of $21,750 and requires Township Board approval.
Comments?
Is this phase 1 considered complete with this payment?
The final will be the restoration associated at the end of October when grass seed will grow.
So there'd be an invoice associated with that.
I'm envisioning
Water
something.
infrastructure wise,
I'm sorry,
with actual water infrastructure wise,
that's done.
done?
With the exception of Rose Lane.
Okay, okay.
And I would just like to comment what a nice job John Henry did on this in a timely manner. And to your question about the finishing up, I took a drive down there a week or so ago, and quite frankly, I couldn't tell that there'd been construction there. So I don't know how much. I didn't see where there was a whole lot of reseeding that was going to need to be done. They did a very nice job of. All the residents are very happy. So I think we're fortunate to have John Henry on any projects we can get him on.
I think we, the township, should keep in mind there's that sign regarding the grant agreement.
have.
Okay. Just upon completion, there's a sign that needs to be removed.
Gotcha.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the partial payment number 2 to John Henry Excavating for Phase 1 water hookups in the amount of $21,750.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call?
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Vector truck repairs.
All right, your packet contains an invoice from Northern Truck Repair in the amount of $2,525 for a tank repair on the Vector truck to be paid out of the Sewer Fund 590-000-930.000 repairs and maintenance. The repair requires Township Board approval. The board should note that tomorrow, the 15th, both members of the DPW and F&V will have a Vector truck training, hands-on demonstration, and be able to get questions answered during that hands-on training.
Any comments?
Yeah, the fact that there's a training day for the DPW and F&V, should I pick up from that there was some misuse of the Vector truck that led to these repairs?
I think there's a difference in the concept of the appropriate use in different situations. And so there is the concept of how much water to be used during certain, during the use of the truck. And so we want to be able to bring somebody in that provides this training professionally. And during that hands-on, both the DPW and F&V will be able to hear it at the same time as far as what to do when. And then there will be, that'll be followed up by standard operating procedures on what to do when. That can be a binder in the Vector truck.
So if this training is tomorrow, you must already have this professional instructor lined up.
We do.
Okay. This truck has cost us quite a bit in repairs, hasn't it?
Consistently. Anything with hydraulics.
It's inherent with a Vector truck because there's so many motors and so many components to it that for decades, I've heard nothing but maintenance issues with Vector trucks.
Not just ours,
Correct.
Vector trucks in general.
Yes.
It's hearsay, but I must admit that I have heard, I don't even remember where, that the current problem is because somebody didn't know what they were doing that was using the truck. Am I close on that?
That's what the training is supposed to accomplish tomorrow, is so that everybody is on the same page as to exactly how to use it in particular situations, so that, because right now is you have people that feel that it should be used this way, others that say it should be used that way. Any of them wrong, both of them wrong, whatever it is, we'll have the training to make sure it's set. And
One last question. Who uses this truck? I gather it moves around different. Is it only F&V and our DPW that use this truck, or do we loan it out to different towns, or how many different users are there for this?
So the main user is F&V.
Okay.
To do both water and sewer. You have the road commission, for example, they use Vector trucks. They contract for those Vector trucks. They don't own the Vector trucks. F&V is the predominant user. I am not aware of other municipalities using the Vector truck, but I believe we have historically helped out, say, Oscoda Township if there was an emergency.
And we would operate it,
Oscoda Township would.
really? So are they invited to this training session?
No, I did not extend that invitation.
Why not?
I didn't. I am not,
Does
since
that
I've,
happen once a year or so that
I-
Ensemble uses?
I am not aware of them using it since I've been here.
Okay.
And for such a piece of equipment, and given what we're sort of learning from this experience of people not being able to get on the same page, maybe we don't loan it out to people who aren't trained. That might be a decent decision from here forth. If they need our emergency assistance, they can pay for the person from Oscoda Township to be with the truck and use it, operate it. Just a comment, not a motion.
Well, we need the truck, so I move that we approve the $2,525 invoice from Northern Truck Repair for the latest repair of the Vector truck.
Support.
motion by Mr. Byer, support by Mr. Gasky. Roll call?
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Offsetting 2019 appropriations for O&M fund.
All right. This is seasonal and lawn maintenance overtime. So basically, the 2018, Resolution 2018-32 is the Annual Appropriations Act. And Section 8 in there is the adoption of budget by cost center within the fund states. However, no transfers of appropriations for line items related to personnel or capital outlays may be made without board approval by budget adjustment. Therefore, I need the board to approve the increase of 2019 appropriations by $6,000 in lines 236 236-707.000 and 236-266-710.000. The issue stems from the DPW taking over the mowing on the Wordsmith base properties owned by the township instead of contracting this work out. Overall, this has been a significant cost reduction measure within the property O&M Fund 236 for 2019. I'm proposing to offset the increase by reducing line 236-266-801.000 for professional fees by $6,000. Therefore, this request will not result in a net increase to 2019 appropriations for property O&M Fund 236 and requires Township Board approval.
Comments? Is there a motion?
Yeah, I move that we approve the offsetting $6,000 expenditure lines within the property O&M Fund 236. As stated, the increase of 236-266-707.000 and 236-266-710.000 by the same $6,000.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call?
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes. Motion's passed. Offsetting appropriations for the general fund.
All right, so this is dealing with zoning overtime. What we're trying to do is be able to address these throughout the year instead of coming with hundreds of budget adjustments at the end of the year like last year. So as described above, I need the Township Board approval to increase 2019 appropriations by $1,071 for line 101, General Fund 101-722-709.000, zoning overtime, and offsetting this with a $1,071 reduction to line 101-722-716.000 for hospitalization insurance. This request will not result in a net increase to the 2019 appropriations for the General Fund 101 and requires Township Board approval.
Comments?
And the reduction in hospitalization insurance is because we won't need it by the end of the year.
Correct.
Hopefully. Okay, that was the whole point. Good.
Yeah, I don't want to come back again.
Well, or short ourselves on hospitalization insurance.
Correct.
Thank you.
Is there a motion?
All right, then I move that we approve the offsetting $1,071 expenditure lines within the General Fund 101 by the $1,071 offset.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Mr. Gajewski. Roll call?
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Bonfire software.
All right, so your packet contains a string of emails from the Old Orchard Park staff, a detail of the $3,500 bonfire software sales proposal, as well as a demo of the bonfire software for better visual representation of the capabilities. And this is to be paid out of the Old Orchard Park Fund 509-000-890.000 contingency. This software will increase operational efficiency at Old Orchard Park by getting the reservation system to the point of online capability. The software can be customized by the Old Orchard Park staff on the township's network, so it can be implemented once the internet connection is established by ATI. Old Orchard Park staff will need to work with the Treasurer's Office to integrate credit card capabilities for the point-of-sale system linked to this software. Old Orchard staff will be able to take credit card payments via tablets at individual campsites instead of all campers coming into the office to make payments. And the bonfire software purchase requires Township Board approval.
Comments?
I'm happy to see this purchase finally happening because I think we're one of the few campgrounds in the state that doesn't have online reservation system. So this will
long
dramatically
overdue.
launch us forward.
Yeah, be good.
Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the $3,500 expenditure for bonfire software proposed, as proposed by the Old Orchard, by the Director of Parks and Recreation for the Old Orchard Park.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call?
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next is for the sale of real estate. I make a motion that the superintendent with our real estate company be authorized to negotiate a counteroffer in regards to price, any time limits, and any reverter clauses.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Cummings. We'll define this as related to Skeel property. Motion by Mr. Weed, support Mr. Cummings. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Okay, on to the supervisor's report. Any comments regarding the informational items of the MPART meeting regarding new PFAS limits for the state and the decking at Ken Ratliff Park? All right, then on to the superintendent 2019 evaluation. The evaluations are attached. I received all but one. Is there any comments regarding the evaluations? I will mention there is a mistake on the summary, and that is that under Mr. Palmer, there is one that is a 4 that should have been a 5. But it did not make a difference in the average score.
Want to point out that I am the missing guy. There's several reasons I am the missing guy on this, but one of them, or two of them or so, is I really have a problem with the document. I mean, the public should know that 11 pages of questions, 11 pages of, that doesn't mean there's 11 questions. There are many questions per page. I find it overkill. I find that the subject of some of the questions are so closely related with other questions. And I mentioned this a year ago, that I thought this was a blown-up document. My second reason is the way it's treated. We just heard that there was a correction there. 3, maybe 4 of the people that voted like, it goes from 5 to 1, or I guess you can put a 0 down if you want. But 3 or 4 members of the board that did turn it in used all the same numbers, all the way down, 5s. There were 2 exceptions where people that went with all 5s had a 4 in there, but we just erased that. So now it's 2 that were fully 5s on every question, and the other one was 5s with 1 4. And then there was another with all 4s. 4 is very good. The treasurer and the clerk were not part of this. I would value their opinions more than any others. including my own if I was in there, because they deal with Mr. Schaefer in the same building day after day. But with this all fives, if I were Mr. Schaefer, I'd almost be embarrassed. I mean, you know, this is his second year, and in other words, there's no room for improvement. He's walks on water. I don't think anybody walks on water, and I knew that was coming. So I just I'm not happy with the mechanism. So, but I am the missing guy. So. I do intend on talking with Mr. Schaefer about my thoughts, and I'm not going to just stay away completely, but I will find a different avenue to communicate with you. So.
One question I had, just to be clear, because we're voting on extending it for another year, and there's some changes in the term. This would extend it to 2022, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I don't think I concur with Mr. Byers' statement with regard to the quality of the evaluations by this board. I don't think that trustees have any less hands-on experience with Mr. Schaefer than the clerk and the treasurer. I think that is not just invalidating, but it's preposterous, because I'm in Township Hall far more than Mr. Byer is. I have quite a lot
That's
of,
for sure.
yeah,
I'm not even in this town, so.
right, yeah. So I would just say that I don't think that that's a fair statement, but, yeah, just want to say that.
Well, I think it depends on the trustee. There's four of us, and some people are in the township hall all the time, maybe too much. But I still stand by my statement that I think the clerk and the treasurer have really nitty-gritty contact with the township superintendent. And I just value their opinion, and I've looked over what they had to say, but giving someone all fives, you could, with your eyes closed, some 5, 5, 5, 5, all the way down.
Did you question this when the evals would come in for Mr. Stalker?
No, because I didn't get this kind of thing as much. I did get,
You didn't
I
get
think all
firewall.
ones from you.
You didn't
on
get
that.
firewall fives.
Not that I
from
recall.
Most of the board members when Stalker was here.
No, I don't recall. that.
Yes, they did. In fact, Mr. Stalker was upset if he didn't get mostly fives.
I don't think so.
Well, he was upset when I didn't give him a fives. I mean, it was like, that was what happened in October last,
He
2
got all
years ago.
ones from one person and he survived.
Do you have proposal of a new evaluation form?
I do not. I do not.
So any suggestions on improvement for evaluation form?
Make it a little smaller.
That's it? Just make it smaller?
A little smaller, and less questions a little more separate. I think, Aaron, with all due respect, I've seen you come up with stuff like this before. I remember when we were seeing the DDA in the throes of whether they're going to exist anymore. And halfway through that process, you as the supervisor and a member of the DDA, and I was at this meeting, just as an observer. I was not a member of it anymore, but I remember you coming up with a thing that I want you folks to come up with a list of projects that you're going to do for the next quarter of a century. I couldn't believe that. you know, what are the things that you're gonna do for the next 25 years? Would have made more sense to say, what did you accomplish in the last 5 years? That would have been of interest, but holy man, expecting any group, this new group, you know, what are you gonna do in the next 25 years? I don't mean to dwell on that, but I mean,
Do you have recommendations for a new evaluation
no.
other than just make it shorter? Because this evaluation, most of the questions are referenced straight out of the statute.
the statute, what?
It's all referenced. Every question has a reference to the state law regarding the superintendent.
So are you saying that most towns use this document?
All I'm saying is that this evaluation is based on the state law regarding a township superintendent.
I'm sure, knowing you, that it is all kinds of documentation linked with that, but
So it's like
I'm
you,
talking about a common sense thing here.
and what would that be?
Well, last year, I mentioned that I thought it was kind of a overdone thing, and I thought, well, maybe someone, primarily yourself, would say, let's get together and see what you would come up with. But that didn't happen, and we get the same one this year, so. But I mean, the other members of the board responded, and that's fine. So.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the continuation of Mr. Schaefer's contract for an additional year and authorize the supervisor and clerk to sign the proposed contract with the changes as shown in the contract in the packet.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. For training and education, in the packet is a long narrative that I wrote up regarding the values of training and education for both board members and employees. How this came about is that the treasurer questioned about using my statutory authority to authorize an Oscoda board member from the Senior Center Building Commission to attend the Michigan Association of Planning and have it paid for by the township. The information I presented and is attached, along with the brochure of the event itself, thoroughly explaining each class, is attached. It should explain my reasonings for wanting all members of all township boards to attend any formal municipal training they can. In addition, just because a class may be on a specific subject does not mean that it does not apply to other board positions. And I have a list here of classes at that conference that pertain to all positions. There's ethical decision-making, a code of ethics, decision-making skills and how to apply them to your decision-making and know when to ask for help. Special workshop to provide participants with the tools to translate social science research on how our brains process information into accessible, memorable strategies for communicating more effectively with the public about important social issues. Understanding past failures and formulating an optimistic way forward with specific policy and development strategies regarding poverty and prosperity in the community, learn about new state government structures, new directions, and new priorities, and where to go for state agency-related information and resources. There's also a general law session. There were planning classes that every board that we have works at some way with a form of land use. As I had in the beginning of this, an educated board is an effective board. We have had in the past where board members who had not been educated in legal matters or in planning matters have made decisions that have cost this township in legal fees in excess of $40,000. I would much rather spend $500 or $5,000 on training board members, individual board members for those amounts, than to end up in very expensive lawsuits or very expensive issues resulting from poor decisions or poor actions created from any board member or from any employee. The more educated we are, the better we can function, the more appropriate decisions we can make. The faster we can make our decisions, we can become far more efficient. Every dollar we spend on training and education saves us many thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, years down the road.
Where did you come up with this $40,000 in legal fees that we've lost because of bad decisions?
One of them was a board member who made a motion that we do not do business with people that we are in litigation with.
Well, I agree on that, so. Help me here. What is the committee that oversees the senior center? What's the proper name?
The Senior Building Commission.
Okay. They meet 4 times a year, 5? On an average. There is, I guess, no structure, but, and I think at this meeting, half the participants from Oscoda were from this organization, the Senior Center Board. We already voted on the bills at the beginning of this meeting, and I don't understand why we are changing this and voting on that again.
Only 3 of the people who attended were put in the bill pay list. One of them was left out.
Was that an error?
No, that was intentional.
Well,
On the treasurer's part, let me clarify. I want to make sure they didn't think it was intentional on my part.
okay. I don't know, what the $415 charge is for participating in the convention, right? It doesn't.
Correct.
Does it cover lodging? Does it cover meals?
No, and there was, the only thing that was being requested was the reimbursement for the training itself.
Well, so we have a husband-wife combo going there, and I would think that if I, as a board member, were going to attend this meeting, and my wife was at another member of a board that meets, as I said, out of 52 weeks in a year, they meet maybe 4 times, sometimes 5. I could take notes for her and just kind of tell her what's going on, especially since another member of that same board is attending also. I don't.
The problem is that when people go to training, it is very different to hear it from the horse's mouth than to get it regurgitated from somebody else third hand.
When there are
Better to
numerous,
go ahead.
there are numerous classes to take, so one person can't possibly attend all of the classes. I would just like to read a statement here from Miss Larrabee, was at the class, and this is one of the sessions that she took. It's called The Divided City, Poverty and Prosperity. And what she wrote here is, I also learned that a city or township government must not look back, but must look forward and embrace change. We must have a mindset and plan looking forward for the future if we want the township to prosper. Now, I take from that the information that she gleaned in that symposium would be beneficial to anybody on any committee. And those are the kinds of things that getting training and going to these sessions where there are multiple classes to choose from. And you obviously pick ones that are more specific to your particular interest, but there are also general classes, like one was general law. Well, I don't know anybody, I don't care if you only meet once a year, could benefit from knowing what the actual laws are, as opposed to being on a committee, whatever the committee is, and not knowing what the laws. I will tell you, I have learned a lot since my time on this board as it relates to laws that we are governed by. And as Mr. Weed pointed out earlier, in the past, some board members have made legal mistakes in their decisions, and it's cost the township considerable money. I think money that we spend on training, first of all, these are volunteers, and I think Mr. Weed will back me up on this, that it's difficult to get people to step forward to be on these boards. And then once you do, now if you get somebody on a board, whatever board it is, and they say, well, I don't really want to be on that board, but okay, I'll show up at the meetings and discuss the issues. So now you've got somebody there. Or if you get somebody that says, okay, yeah, I'll be on the board, but I may need some training because I don't have the expertise. Well, which one of those board members do you think is going to make a better board member? I would argue that the one that says, I'm going to need some training to help me understand what it is I'm supposed to do. So I think, in my opinion, money that we spend on training for any board member in any level is money well invested by the township. And that's my personal opinion.
I would agree with you. And to go with a couple points that you had, and Mr. Weed had mentioned, you know, it isn't just trying to avoid legal matters. It's about doing it right the first time. It's about, to the point of their quote earlier, you don't want to be trying to repair the past in order to pave your way for the future. So I just don't even understand the pettiness of this problem at $400 and some.
Well, I'm repeating what I'm saying. If your colleague on the board is going to be there and your husband is going to be there, do we really need to send that person and spend another $415?
Yes,
And
every single board member needs to attend training
you're-
face-to-face with an instructor and not rely on partial information given from somebody else who attended that training.
They're on two
And not
different
only
boards.
that, they don't go to, when we go to these conferences, have you been to them?
I've been to
Okay. So in these conferences, you have multiple classes at the same time, and so one person can go to one class, one person can go to the other class, and you disperse some of your learning that way.
I'd like to say here in response to Mr. Byer, so listening to the quote from Ms. Larrabee, I take from that it's a perfect example of how a person could not have formed that conclusion, could not have had that realization if the person had merely heard some bullet points from their spouse. It's an experiential thing. Training as a teacher is experiential. You are trying to impart not just some bullet points, but also some context, some color, some information, some way of how did this problem or this situation get handled? Was it good, bad, or otherwise? And there's dozens of aspects to how you could walk away with betterment from that. There's why they did it right, why they did it wrong, how to do it right in the future. I don't understand, like I said, I don't understand why we're discussing this, why it has been a problem and why we need to discuss it. I think this is infinitely petty and probably the result of some personal squabble between the parties.
And I find the denial of paying for this person's training is minimizing the building commission. It's a very important board. It's very important they do their jobs well, because something could happen over there that could land us in $1 million lawsuit.
So that 50% of our delegation down there is from that board? 2 out of
We have
4?
3 out of 5.
Didn't we vote on 3 in the bills, and now you're talking about...
I thought you were talking building commission board or the people who went?
I'm talking about the people that went.
Oh, the people that went.
50% of them, according to what you're wishing that we would say yes to, are from the building board.
We have.
And it's
We
probably,
have one person with 2 people that are on the planning commission, 1 on the ZBA, and another one.
who's on the ZBA that's a part of this?
Catherine Larrabee.
Oh, okay. Okay. And you were also an alternate on the... I am. Yes. Yeah, so that's where I come up with the 2. So, Call the question, vote if you wish.
I have a comment to make. So I'm supportive of training, but if taxpayer money is going to be used, I think it's got to be relevant training. And in my opinion, this issue that we're considering is not and was not. And for the record, these had been brought to me to register the individuals for the classes, and I shared at the time of the request with Mr. Schaefer and Mr. Weed my concerns with the relevance of the training.
I actually heard that it was because your credit card was full. Was that not the reason given to the person as to why it didn't get charged at the time?
Those are, no, that, to answer your question in short,
Okay.
no. Those are two different situations.
What was the other situation, just out of context?
The hotel reservation required for the stay associated with the conference. Supposed to be, ideally, was going to be taken care of by a check through an invoice. Upon, if we want to get into all these details, upon,
Well, I'm interested to know why your credit card is maxed out.
because it has a, I guess I'll be careful with my words. I guess to put it very succinctly, it has a small limit.
I see.
That these hotel rooms practically used in and of it themselves, and I think I had another charge. If you, I can justify the expenses if you
Okay.
feel necessary, but short answer is a very small limit, and the cost of the rooms was close to it.
Was high.
I did my very best to get those rooms covered. It was an extremely unnaturally complicated situation that I spent a lot of time trying to resolve, so.
Let me understand, isn't for this one particular, because we did authorize in the payment of bills for the other three members to be paid, so that, we're only talking about one person, and isn't the only thing we're talking about is the cost of registration for that person?
the
We're
cost of
talking
the-
about $415, the cost of
Cost of
being a
resi-
part of the deal, yeah.
Cost for the registration for the.
You're
not-
Cost of the
you're making
conference.
it sound like a small item. It is the biggest item.
But there isn't any lodging or anything else, it's mileage or anything that's included in.
There's no other
cost.
item to compare to it, so there's only one item.
It's just the registration for this one
Well,
person.
as I understand it, lodging and meals can trickle in at a later time. So far of the 4 people that went, there's only been one claim for, very rightfully so, of meals and lodging. More to come.
I don't know that, and I'm not sure I understand that point, Mr. Byer. When I submit an expense report, I don't do it in pieces. I think I would assume, if I were the treasurer, that
Well, the
when I'm getting
$415
one.
is paid by the clerk's office. So these people are not trickling things in. They just haven't submitted their cost yet. It'll be one thing, meals and lodging. It's not a piecemeal thing.
So they're disassociated, so someone who wishes to submit for reimbursement for mileage or meals doesn't do so at the time of the payment for the conference or the hotel. Usually those
Right.
things are
Afterward.
handled separately, yeah. So that's afterward. Now, in this case, I'm not that involved with the process, but to my knowledge, they haven't been submitted, so we're a little ahead of ourselves here in this discussion, I think. It may not be an issue. It may, but I think that's,
How was the
we have enough
request,
on our plate right here.
fair enough, how was the request for reimbursement submitted?
There's a form filled out for
Right,
mileage and
Exactly.
meals, and
That's-
receipts are attached, and there's a
that's the
resolution
expense
policy.
report that I'm referring to, that I filled out when I've attended training.
Yes.
That also includes my lodging and meals, like you said. And so I don't know, if it wasn't on there, then why would there be another expense report? Usually expense reports are submitted whole cloth, one trip, not in pieces. So I'm just going back to my initial comment that I was challenging Mr. Byer on. I don't think this is coming in pieces. I think what we received is the request and
Sure.
whatever.
And it may not have been wise for me to interject into here, but I'm trying to get past this and resolve it for tonight.
I'm still working on the personal vendetta that I have that's behind all this.
Okay, well, you can ask Jamie, I suppose.
I'm trying to guess what.
Oh, okay.
Just for clarification, in the payment of bills, we authorized $415 for 3 of the 4 people, which would be just the registration.
Support.
Did you make a, was that a motion?
No, I didn't make
Oh, I thought it was a motion. I heard a
okay.
motion,
Just
sorry.
information.
Fine enough. Well, then I'll move. I move that we pay, we
Oh.
ask the, go ahead, I'm sorry. You want to interrupt?
Before we get into the voting
Sure,
thing.
sure.
Because you had mentioned something, John, you had mentioned something about it not being relevant.
Hmm.
And I find it to be very relevant. If this were riparian right law training, I can see where that wouldn't be relevant to the building commission. But there were several aspects within this that were relevant. And I specifically pointed those out.
I'm sorry.
And I wish that more people would have attended this training, from this board, from the other boards. There was a lot done in that meeting that could have benefited a lot of people here.
For clarification, you pointed out the relevant trainings attended or that you deemed possible to attend.
Possible to attend.
Okay, then in my mind, there's a discussion to be had, and I don't intend to have it here tonight about that list that you provided. Secondary to that, there's a difference between what's possible to attend and what was actually attended.
What was attended?
I could pull, there was a bit of a list from the individual that in question that we're discussing. I have to get it here in my packet. I would be content to leave it at my judgment of those sessions that were attended. My judgment is that it wasn't relevant training. I don't want to go through the list here right now tonight, but we can.
I was going to say, that's not very transparent. I mean, we're really obviously having quite a discussion here. I think that,
I don't think this is time best served, and we have a lot of discussions. Mr. Weed many times tries to move these meetings along and do away with sidetrack discussions and stick to the business of the township. And but tonight seems to be another matter. So
Because the training is exceptionally important.
well,
So many
So-
things have not been done properly in this township because of a lack of training and education.
yes.
It is one of
The-
the
the
most
tr- the
important
training-
things we should be doing.
I'm supportive of training. Relevant training, I think, is very key to the matter, but I'm supportive of training. The issue that I think we're wasting time here by getting into these details. And that was the point I was trying to make, but you took that over towards whether training was relevant or not. I'm making the point of, many times it's been discussed that these meetings get off topic and off track and aren't scoped to the business of the township in a broad sense. But that's not the case tonight, and now it seems to be that a judgment call is made on what issues can be off sidetrack and what issues can't. And so I'm a little unsure of things at the moment, but if you think I'm being non-transparent by not wanting to read the email, I'm happy to do so. I just don't think it's the best use of our time here. And I really don't relish the idea of reading through this, but
Okay, did you want to continue? Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, I do. So I move that we order the treasurer to reimburse the attendee for the $415 training expense.
Did you want to include deputy treasurer in your motion?
Yes, sure. I include the deputy treasurer as well, the treasury department, treasurer and deputy treasurer.
I think there's a problem with the motion. The motion is to order the treasurer and the deputy treasurer to reimburse the individual who attended the training. But payment hasn't been made by anybody unless I'm misinformed that this person has actually paid on their own behalf. It's a matter of whether the organization of MAPS is going to be paid for this training
It
or
was my
not.
understanding in this discussion that it's been about reimbursement. So I'm using the word reimbursement. So,
don't think that's
Mr.
the
Reed, is it your understanding that this person paid the training or not?
Maybe it should be more generalized that the treasurer and deputy treasurer pay the $415 associated with the training, and whether that was to MAPS or to the individual.
Fair enough. Fair enough, then that's what I'll say. So then, I move that we order that the treasurer, deputy treasurer, pay the $415 for MAPS, for training to MAPS or to the attendee, whichever is necessary, in order to move this forward.
And what about other expenses for the members?
Those aren't on the table here. We're talking about reimbursement of training. That expense has not been submitted. That isn't what's being discussed here. The person attended, so are we suggesting here that we're going to have another similar discussion if this person submits for a hotel room?
Well, if any of the members submit for hotel room.
A hotel room, I don't,
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Okay, then, let me do this one more time. So then I move that we order that the treasurer, deputy treasurer reimburse this unnamed attendee for his or her expenses attending a training, including the $415, which may or may not need to be paid to the individual or MAPS.
Can I interrupt just for 1 second? We're talking about all 4 participants, not just one.
We haven't discussed all 4 participants, only the one here.
Well, there were 4 people that went,
But they were not,
and they should be paid for their
Contested.
expenses.
but they're not contested here, Bill.
Yes,
This
they
discussion
haven't
was
been
about the
paid.
one that was missing.
They haven't been paid.
One has. One person has submitted their costs, meals and lodging, and it's part of the paperwork that we, in the consent agenda, and we've already voted yes. It wasn't a problem at all. One of those payments has already been submitted and voted to be paid for.
But not all of
Okay.
them. Not all of them, that's the point.
Then don't support my motion and restate a motion on your own. That's my answer to this. I'm trying to move this forward as well.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Is there support for the motion? Is there support for the motion? All right, then I call the motion as failed. Is there another motion?
I will offer another motion. I will move to authorize the treasurer and/or deputy treasurer to pay and reimburse the travel, lodging, per diem, and training expenses associated with the week of 27 September 2019 with Michigan Association of Planning Conference for all 4 township members who attended.
I'll support that.
I would like to get it in writing if I could.
Sure.
Same one that was in there.
Okay, okay, all right, very good. Is it, it's the same, it's the
It's
same, okay.
pretty
for
much similar to
confirmation.
that,
Okay,
yes.
okay.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Weed.
My comment on the motion is that, given the sequence of events and services that have already been rendered for this training, it's difficult to not pay the organization for the services. It kind of limits our options here. So I just want to note that before I vote.
Roll call?
Mr. Gieske,
At this point, yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Byer,
No.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed,
Yes, motion's passed. Sewer line installation on Elk Lane. In your packets, the previous information that was provided to all board members within 5 September email from the superintendent, 9 September superintendent's report, 24 June supervisor's report, and email correspondence related to counsel hired by neighboring properties. Based on this information, I'm recommending the board have re-reviewed all of this information. It is clear to me that continuing this process from the motion presented on 24 June is resulting in undue cost to the general users of the sewer system and excessive administrative hours of staff. Any comments? All right, then I make a motion that the research already presented reasonably satisfies and finalizes the motion of 24 June 2019 regarding this subject, that connecting an individual user of the Henniger Beach Plat to the Oscoda Beach Plat system is connecting to a part of the system not designed for users outside of the Oscoda Beach Plat. It will create future land use issues, and that connecting in such a manner is thereby not authorized. That any furtherance of sewer connections within the Henniger Beach Plat be worked by the associated residents through the normal special assessment district process with a properly designed system to ensure proper use and preserve the integrity of the sewer system.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Palmer. Any comments?
My only note to that motion, and it's just a suggestion, that the board considers this action to be in response to any formal requests made by the property owners to resolve this. It's not an open-ended thing. This is the board's response.
All right, roll call.
Mr. Byer,
No.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. All right, on to resolution 2019-29.
So resolution number 2019-29 is regarding the utility ordinance public hearing. And the township board is scheduling a public hearing for the 28th of October, the 2 weeks from tonight at 7 p.m., Monday the 28th, to discuss the revisions and compilation of the utility ordinance. A copy of this will be in the clerk's office and for review by the public. And the public hearing will be to hear from any of the residents associated with the updates to the utility ordinance. It was formerly the separate water ordinance and sewer ordinance, and now this is combined into a utility ordinance.
Comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2019-29 to have a public hearing of the utility ordinances on Monday, October 28th, 2019 at 7 o'clock.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Resolution 2019-30.
All right, so this resolution is the authorization for submission of a grant application. And this has to do with applying to the Secretary of State for a grant to purchase accessible voting devices for use by individuals with disabilities. The clerk has spearheaded this initiative to be able to apply for the grant through the Secretary of State's office.
Comments? Is there a motion?
Yeah, I move that we do adopt resolution 2019-30 regarding the grant that has been explained. Grant application.
Support. Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Mr. Weed. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Oscoda Area First Responders Storage Request.
All right, so in your packet, you have a letter dated October 1st, 2019, from Ryan Ridgway, the former chief of the Oscoda Area First Responders. And on there, basically, he is requesting that the permission to be able to store records, including the required law that requires them to maintain patient records for the next 10 years or more. Specifically, he is looking to be able to store this in the Awney Medical Center.
Which part?
Utilize an unused room in the Awney Medical Center for storage, is what he says in here. They've also, the Oscoda Area First Responders are in the process of moving out of the Brinkman EMS station over by the hilltop, and they're in need of room to put this equipment and records.
Any comments?
Can we do that? I thought that they're a separate organization. They may be a nonprofit, but I mean, can we actually utilize township facilities for another organization like that? I mean, I'm just asking. I don't know the answer. It seems like the answer is no, just based on what I know, but I'm just raising the question.
I'm not sure with them being a contracted service.
I don't know. Yeah, so I don't know.
Who paid for the building when they're in Brinkman building? Did the township pay for that or did they pay for it?
Which building?
Brinkman, first respond building up there by the hilltop where they're moving out of?
That's the county building? You talking about paying the rent?
Yeah. Who paid that?
Oh, I just can't remember what we came up with on that one.
I don't know if there's any rent being paid or asked for. I think it was, they had room and
They let them utilize it.
I thought at some point we went there, the county had to mandate rent because they
Yeah,
weren't
I
allowed
thought
to
something would
donate
come up out of
space
that.
for the nonprofit.
Is this
Can we rent them the space for $1?
Do we need to postpone this?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Okay, so we'll obtain further clarification on this request.
They're asking for short term. I'd like to know what short term is. And if we're legal, if we can rent them the space for $1 until they get short term disposition of their items.
do you get the impression that what they're asking of us is that we give them a kind of a temporary stopgap storage thing?
Yeah, that's what it's, how it reads here, for boxes of items until we can properly liquidate allowed items, you know? What are the
My
items? They
take
don't
is that
specify
they
that.
want storage space for the 10 years that's mentioned.
Yeah,
Well,
That's
the
correct.
records are something different.
I don't know.
that's
But
what I
that was just
interpreted.
my first,
There's 2 or 3 different items in this
Yeah.
request.
I'm looking at the 10 years as well, because if they just close their doors, they've got 10 years from that date for records retention.
But I'm just looking for the short-term disposition.
Right?
That's all I'm looking for.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right, then on to the land division application.
Right. So what you have in your packet is a memo from the assessor, and it identifies the specific application for parcel 063-034-300-004-30, located on Hull Island, has been submitted to the assessor's office by Central Michigan Railway Company, and the purpose of this division is to sell 0.25 acre parcel to the owner of Lot 19, Hull Island subdivision. And as usual, this application has been reviewed and signed by township representatives in the zoning, water sewer, treasurer, and assessing offices. The staff is recommending for the township board to approve the land division request as proposed.
Any comments?
The form has a space for your signature. Is that needed, or is that something you intend to sign upon our action, or is it unnecessary?
For what page for the packet? I'm sorry.
302.
That's new. Yeah, I haven't signed on. I have yet to sign one of these.
Okay. It's inconsequential to me. We'll make the decision, and whether you need to sign it or not, obviously there's time for that. So I would have asked Friday, but we ran short on time, so.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
I would make a motion to approve the land division as presented.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call?
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Rockfest property use request.
All right, so the Veterans Memorial Park of Northeast Michigan is requesting permission to host the annual Oscoda Rock Fest at Furtaw Field on August 8th, 2020. They're also requesting access to the field for setup on Friday, August 7th at 9 a.m. until 10 p.m., as well as access to the field Sunday, August 9th from 8 a.m. until 5 p.m. to tear down and clean up. I did clarify that the actual date of the event on August 8th is that Saturday. The last band will be scheduled to go on at 10, and they usually play for an hour, so then they would leave after the band gets done at 11 o'clock.
Comments?
What time would that open on Saturday, and what would the times be? From,
If it follows the same as last year, it started at noon
so from
to 11
noon to
p.m.
11?
They would probably have access to the field prior to the actual start of the event. So probably 8 a.m. till 11 p.m.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve the request for Furtaw Field for the 3 days as expressed in the request, adding Saturday from 8 to 11.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll Roll call?
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. All right, we're on to our second public comment period. Anyone may speak without filling out a card. There's still a 4-minute time limit.
You had,
Oh,
we
sorry,
had
that's
number
right, we had
five.
number 5.
All right.
Almost.
So the lead agency agreement, this is from the Iosco County Road Commission, and they are the actual applicant for the TAP grant, the Transportation Alternative Program. And this is associated with Phase 3 of the bike path, the Iosco Exploration Trail. And so what this agreement is very similar to the previous agreement, and that is what the township attorney emailed out as far as the indemnification paragraph that is in there. And he wanted to indicate to the board the similarity between the two documents as far as the previous one and the first one. So the lead agency agreement is needs to be signed by both the township of Oscoda would be the supervisor, and then it'll be signed by the Iosco County Road Commission. And so what this does is establishes the lead agency for Phase 3, and it is required that the Road Commission apply for the TAP grant. They have a resolution of support already teed up, and it is contingent on the township signing the lead agency agreement for Phase 3 of the bike path.
Any comments? Is there a motion?
I move that we go ahead with this lead agency agreement as presented.
And authorize the supervisor to sign.
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call?
Mr. Palmer,
yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. All right, now we're on to our second public comment period with a 4-minute time limit, and when you come to the podium, please introduce yourself. Does anybody have any public comment? All right, then on to board comments. Does anybody have anything?
Yeah. In response to my reluctance to read the email we discussed earlier and the notion of not being transparent, I'd like to point out that the email is in the board packet. It's a public document. It's available online. It's available in my office. If anybody, member of the public or the board wanted to discuss the email in question in detail, I'd be more than happy to do so. And also that I think, I didn't mention it during the conversation, but that we need some parameters township-wide regarding training, how approvals get made, who approves it, and who's watching the budget for trainings, things like that. Right now, there's not much structure as to guidance regarding training, and it can lead to difficult situations, so.
Agree.
I would like to say that based on the evaluations, Mr. Schaefer has been doing a fantastic job. He has put his heart and soul into this job and into the community. He has pumped out an incredible amount of work. And I think that it makes his job much more difficult when board members have expectations but yet bring no solutions or no details. That somehow something is magically to happen. And the things are only going to happen if the board members are involved in making the things happen, if the board members are bringing solutions, if the board members are bringing answers to things. If it's not brought forward, then how can there be an adequate expectation? It's not about just bringing problems forward. Anybody can bring a problem forward. Anybody can bring an idea forward. Every one of us is an idea person. Who can bring detailed solutions? Very difficult to work with if people aren't doing that. And under those circumstances, I applaud you for what you do.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And so do I. You know, my comments and issues had no negative bearing on you at all. So, they're not meant to be anyway, so.
And I would point out that my evaluation, I did have all fives, and I think the reason for that is reflected in Mr. Weed's statements that I believe you're doing an excellent job. If time goes on, and I see if you look at the evaluation, you'll see that I wrote comments in every single category. I didn't just check a box, 1 through 5. I did put comments in there pertaining to that particular item. And I would say that in the future, if I see where things are maybe not going the way they should, or we're getting off track, then that will be reflected in future evaluations. At this time, if you read my summary at the end, I think basically what I said was you've been here a little over a year, and I believe more has happened in this past year and 3 or 4 months than has happened here in the last 10, 15 years, or maybe more. So I quite honestly couldn't find any fault to find in the evaluation. That was the reason for all fives for me. That's my personal opinion. And but we do this every year, and if next year I feel that some of those categories aren't up to what they should be, then that would be reflected in my evaluation at that time. But what you've done in the past just over a year, quite literally, is been phenomenal. So
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you. One other question I had, and I want to make this quick because I got a football game to watch. My fantasy team, I've got a big competition this week. In the sanitary sewer lagoon report, there's a huge amount of information. It appeared to me most of the items seemed to be non-detect. I didn't see anything in there that was, I know in the past.
Yeah, there were exceedances in there.
There were exceedances? Okay, I'll have to review that. It's quite an extensive packet for that in there, and I was going through it, and from what I could tell, there seemed to be pretty much, there was a lot of NDs on there. And the variances were within the percentage tolerances, it seemed. So I'll look back through it if you say there are some that I may have missed. That was it.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Mr. Palmer, and I read it. I don't believe I have the technical expertise to fully comprehend there. I mean, I'm getting generalities out of it, but I would appreciate a narrative of some sort, or and I can talk to Kath or whoever I need to. I don't need it in written form, but if you could put me in contact with the best person to speak to about that, because it's a large amount of data, and it's not.
That would be Catherine.
Okay, perfect. Some sort of narrative or explanation to that would be helpful.
I would like to make a comment on Bill's comment where he had written things for every item of the 11 pages. I went through and read those, and most were very good, but I really hate to see somebody slam another person that came before, especially when they don't have the opportunity, they don't have the venue to defend themselves and explain. But rather pointed, if I can quote, Mr. Schaefer has worked diligently to undo the liability that was placed on the township by the past superintendent and the DDA for all the terrible things they did. I don't think you need that, we have a president that does that. If he sees something wrong, he blames Obama or something like that, and that's kind of
Clarification, that wasn't my evaluation.
It says William D. Palmer.
That's not my evaluation.
That's not yours, okay. Well, whoever. But I read one of them, and I saw that more than once. Say what you want to say, but you don't have to take pot shots at people that aren't here that can explain.
Any other comments? I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned. Thanks for coming out.